our next speaker, Nonie Darwish, I'd say is arguably one of the bravest people on the planet and probably one of the loneliest. She's the founder of Arabs for Israel. Tough. And she's the author of a book called Now They Call Me Infidel, and another book that discusses the terrifying global implications of Islamic law. And further to what Sally was saying, it struck me as I was listening to her that for us in Canada, in the West, talk is cheap. Our public discourse is largely civilized, it's almost never violent. And so the critics and the pundits and the politicians and you and I, we don't have much at risk. And we certainly don't face these nut bars issuing fatwas so that other nut bars inclined to kill themselves and wanting to take as many of us with them can execute their judgments. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to stand up to that kind of pressure. When you consider that a man can be murdered on the streets of Amsterdam and that personalities like Hirsi Ali or the great writer have to live under constant 24-hour guard, what it proves as we watch the craven liberals and soft lefties of this country cave in, what it proves is that threats work. Ask the Comedy Network in the United States. And that's why I have so much admiration for a woman like the woman who's going to speak to us now, or Tariq Fatah. Tariq, are you out there? Yes, who writes in our newspapers here in Toronto, or Irshad Manji, who can take on this extraordinary, monstrous phenomenon that is walking the world today. Come on out here.
I'm very inspired by this wonderful conference, with all the different ideas, with all the different views, and we still respect each other. I'm especially grateful for being part of this great American civilization, Canada and the United States and all the freedom, democracies. We're very lucky, and we always have to remember that our freedom is not just a given. We have to work hard for it. The reason I appreciate it, and I'm always very grateful, is because I come from the Middle East, and where different ideas are not respected. Different views are not respected. There is no freedom of speech. I'm especially grateful. Just to give you an idea about my background, I was born and raised as a Muslim in Cairo, Egypt, and I grew up as a child in the Gaza Strip, in the heart of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Those were the 50s when I was a child. And my father was the head of the Egyptian military intelligence in Gaza, and his mission, which was Gamal Abdel Nasser's mission, was to destroy Israel, just like Ahmadinejad now. And my father headed the Egyptian Fedayeen operations against Israel. And the Fedayeen caused as much damage and destruction inside Israel. As a result of that, my father was assassinated by Israel. I was 8 years old. I lived as a Muslim, and I went to Gaza elementary schools, where I learned hatred, vengeance, retaliation. Peace was never mentioned. It was not even an option. I grew up with extreme hatred, with of the Jewish people. We used to recite jihadist poetry every day, wishing upon ourselves as 7- and 8-year-old girls to die as a shaheed, meaning a martyr, in the jihad against Israel. I remember being told, don't take candy or fruit from a stranger. It could be a Jew trying to poison you. When you tell things, outright lies like that to children, hatred becomes easy. Terrorism becomes acceptable. Who wouldn't want to terrorize a monster? That's what we were told. We have to terrorize them. They're monsters. And so I decided to speak out after 9/11. I speak out of love for this freedom that I'm living in North America. I'm very appreciative because this is the country that gave me my freedom of speech and my dignity as a woman. And so that's why, one of the reasons I speak. I also speak out of empathy for the state of Israel, a country that really, it should be respected and not hated. I also speak out of love for my culture of origin. It's in desperate need for reformation. There is nothing wrong in admitting we need some reformation in Muslim countries. But my culture of origin is very sensitive to self-criticism and to criticism in general, because we learned only to finger point and accuse others of what should others do so we can be happy. What should Israel do? But we never asked, what should we do to bring peace to the area? It's rarely mentioned in the Arab media. Terrorism is not just hurting Western nations and Israel. Terrorism is destroying the moral fabric and the goodness that I know exists in Arab culture. And that's why I'm speaking. When I learned that the leader of the 19 terrorists was Muhammad Atta from Cairo, the same city I came from, I ran to the phone and called many people in the Middle East, at least 8 people. I wanted them to comfort me, to tell me, what have we done in our educational system and the preaching? What have we done to create generation after generation of perfectly healthy young men who are ready to destroy themselves, to destroy others? Each and every person I called said the same thing. How dare you say this happened? This was done by Arabs. Don't you know this is a Jewish conspiracy? The Jews did it. They were running from the building because they know it was going to explode. That was the day I felt so, I just wept. It was the day I felt I could not relate to this culture anymore. We have to realize that this denial is not serving anybody. It's not good for anybody, not even for Muslims themselves. How can we accuse even our worst enemy of something that we know ourselves, that we have done ourselves? It's not allowed in any religion. So why do our preachers, Muslim preachers, preach and say things about Israel that is totally outright lies? Actually, in the eyes of some Islamists, the Jewish people don't deserve the truth, don't deserve justice, and don't deserve mercy. It's time for a new idea. It's time to look at things in a new paradigm. We must change the situation in the Middle East because it's impacting everybody. It's destroying lives, millions. And it's time to not say what should Israel do. Let them think about it. Let us start saying, what can we do to make a change towards peace? And that's what I'm trying to do. The way the Arabs treated the Jewish people is tragic and a disgrace. And I want to show you, it wasn't only the days when I was a child that we heard all this horrible propaganda about Israel. It's still happening today on Arab TV, day in and day out. I want to show you a few clips from Arab TV.
ليه يا مريم؟ لأن إحنا عداوتنا باليهود دائما مستمرة. يعني لما عرف اليهود وتأكدوا أن سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبي ورسول، أقروا أن هو عداوته مدى الحياة. يعني هيبقوا أعداؤه طول العمر، ما فيش بقى أي فصال في حاجة زي كده. وده اللي بيحصل إلى الآن. يعني القرآن الكريم حتى يصف هذا، يعني ولا تجدن أشد الناس عداوة للذين آمنوا اليهود والذين أشركوا. اليهود هم في الدرجة الأولى، يعني أكثر وأكبر عدو للإسلام هم الإيه؟ هم اليهود.
اللهم دمر اليهود تدميرا وحطمهم تحطيما. اللهم ابتليهم بمرض ليس منه شفاء وداء ليس له دواء وانزل عليهم صاعقة من السماء. اللهم ابتليهم بكل بلاء. اللهم ارسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فتجعلهم كعصف مأكول. اللهم رم نساءهم كما رم النساء المسلمين. اللهم يتم أطفالهم كما يتم أطفال المسلمين. اللهم بارك جهود المجاهدين. اللهم بارك جهود المجاهدين. اللهم اجعل مصر قريب. اللهم اجعل مصر قريب. اللهم اجعل مصر قريب. آمين آمين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
ما شاء الله ما شاء الله ما شاء الله. بسم الله ما شاء الله. بسم الله ما شاء الله. عن قصد وعن عمد، يعني تعمدت أن يختم اللقاء بدعوتين طيبين. وزي ما انتم شايفين طبعا ولاد حافظ، مسألة الفهم ستأتي إن شاء الله، ستأتي إن شاء الله إن شاء الله. بس هي دي المرحلة، وده أصغر نموذج من خطباء المستقبل. مع
اليهود سيكولوجيتهم الإرهابية هي أساسا سيكولوجية تنبع أساسا من حبهم للمال فقط. يعني الإله الوحيد أو الدين الوحيد لليهود هو المال، ليست الديانة اليهودية ولا الحلم الأكبر كما يقول إسرائيل الكبرى. هذه كذبة هم يخدعون نفسهم بها. أنا دائما أتساءل لماذا هتلر أبعد الصهاينة أو اليهود؟ بالتأكيد هم شخصيتهم تستحق هذا الأمر، لذلك هم عانوا في هذه المذبحة أو في هذه الإبادة، لذلك هم يتقمصون نفس الشخصية ليعكسوها على الشعب الفلسطيني.
This is the kind of propaganda that is shown day in and day out on Arab TV. Syrian TV, Egyptian TV, Saudi TV, and you wonder why we have terrorists. This kind of propaganda has to end. It's unbelievable. It promotes so much hate. And these are people who are vulnerable. I don't like to criticize any religion. Just like most of us. Nobody wants to criticize religion. But in the sense that religion is a personal relationship with God, it's a private matter. However, if a religion expands itself so much to include a state, a one-party state, with a very elaborate legal system, called Islamic Law, Sharia, and also with a military institution called Jihad, then that religion has opened itself to criticism, because under that law, Sharia law, anybody who leaves Islam must be killed immediately. That's what Sharia law states. Actually, there is a lot of Muslim reformists who want to end these laws, Sharia laws. But 45 Muslim countries have recently signed a human rights, the Cairo Declaration, which stated that Islamic Sharia law supersedes the international human rights laws. So there are 45 countries, at least, where Islamic law must be the above any other law. And that's why we have a duty to speak not against the Islam, the basic religion, but against those who want to regard Sharia law as Islam. Sharia law was created 150 years or 200 years after Muhammad died by those who wanted to conquer the world through Sharia law. And so we have, actually it's our duty to criticize Sharia law. And I will give you some examples to tell you what is Sharia law. And this is the book that I am using. It's called Reliance of the Traveler. It's a mainstream Sharia book in the Middle East. And this is a law, for example. A rebellious wife is one who answers her husband coldly, and actually she could be beaten by her husband. The testimony of a woman in court is half the value of a man. Guess what happens is a man and woman go to court against each other. Who wins? It's always the man. A woman needs 4 male witnesses to prove rape. A woman gets half the inheritance of a man. Divorce is only in the hands of the husband. When the husband says, I divorce you, she's divorced, even if he has made this without really intending to do it. That's what the law says. The killer of an adulterer and an apostate will not be punished. This is a very, very vital law because it encourages vigilante street justice against people who leave Islam. They're called apostates. So anybody on the streets in the Muslim world, we're not just afraid of the government to arrest us and put us to death because we left the religion, but we have to fear our neighbor or anybody on the street who has a fatwa. There is a fatwa issued against us, and anybody on the street can kill us. Also, an adulterer, usually it's an adulteress. Because men under Islamic law have so many ways. They can have up to 4 wives, they can have temporary marriage, they can have pleasure marriage for 1 hour if they want to. So it's very hard to catch a man having adultery. So this law usually affects women because the killer of an adulterer will not be punished. And here is the law number and the page number. This is the law that, in my opinion, encourages honor killing. And that's why many of the men who kill their daughters or their wives in the Middle East, they never go to jail. They get given a slap on the hand, and that's it. The maximum, they put them in jail for 6 months. So this is the law, and it's really devastating because it stands in the way of reform laws against honor killing. There's also no retaliation if a Muslim kills a non-Muslim. This is another law. If a Muslim kills a Muslim, he will get the death penalty. If a Muslim kills a non-Muslim, he will not get the death penalty. So there are many laws, of course, against non-Muslims, and these are some of them. I'm trying to be fast because I have a limited time. A Muslim head of state can come to power through seizure of power, meaning through force. This is totally against our democracy. So people who say that Sharia, Islamic law, is compatible with democracy, it's not true, because there is nothing called election under Sharia. He can come through seizure of power. Is it any wondering why Muslim leaders, most of them come through a coup d'etat or an assassination? And they get celebrated. He's the new hero. Also, Sharia law exempts the head of state from being charged with serious crimes such as murder, adultery, robbery, theft, and drinking. This is totally against our system of government. And it's also obligatory to obey the Muslim head of state, Khalifa, even if he's unjust. You cannot rebel against the Khalifa, even if he's unjust. And what's the definition of jihad? After 9/11, we all heard many people defending 9/11 by saying, but jihad doesn't mean violence, it's an inner struggle, it's self-analysis. 3% of the word jihad, when it's mentioned in the Quran, it doesn't refer to violence. 97%, when it's mentioned in Muslim scriptures, it refers to violence. The definition of jihad in the books, in the mainstream books of Sharia, is to war against non-Muslims, derived from the word mujahada, signifying warfare, to establish the religion. So jihad is also the main duty of every Muslim head of state. And that is a problem because Muslim heads of state thus have to constantly be in jihad against governments that are non-Muslim, especially neighboring ones. Does that give you a reason for Israel? I have to cut that now because I want to conclude because time is out. But I used to hear the cursing of non-Muslims and Jews every Friday, in every Friday prayer, from the pulpits of mosques. And believe it or not, if you grow up with this kind of cursing, it can feel and sound normal and holy. Who am I to judge? These are my religious leaders. And they curse the infidels and the non-Muslims and the Jews, especially the Jews. It's happening until today. Like myself, when I used to feel it's good and normal and justified, there are millions and millions of innocent, good, young Arab children who are subjected to this kind of hate, propaganda, calling Jews all kinds of names, even when we're playing in the recess time in school. Arab kids don't need jihad, they need jobs. Arab kids don't need hate, they need hope. We need to have a new paradigm in how we view Israel. Things are changing, but they are not changing fast enough. We must demand from Arab leaders, as much as they demand from us, to pressure Israel for concessions. Why don't we demand from them to pressure Palestinians for concessions? Pressure your media to end this hate, these ridiculous accusations. Like there was one segment that I couldn't put here. They were accusing Israel of going to Haiti, not to help in the earthquake, but in order to harvest the organs of Haitians. It is this kind of propaganda should never happen in the 21st century. Arab children are the victims of such propaganda, and also Jewish kids who are being killed. All these incidents can change. We can change if the organization of Islamic Conference come and declare that Jihad should not be interpreted in today against Jews and Christians today. Any word referring to jihad against Jews and Christians and pagans applies to the 7th century. Can you believe it if Muslim leaders all come out and say, violent jihad should never be the aspiration of good and peace-loving Muslims anymore. Violent jihad was a commandment at a time of war in the 7th century when Muhammad was fighting for his beliefs. It is no longer applies today. Can you believe what can happen if they come out with this unanimously? Perhaps the Arab-Israeli conflict will end. I believe it can, but we must demand it from them. They need to see themselves in the mirror. And with your help, demand good behavior from everybody, not just from the West or just from Israel. We're all equal here. And excellence should be demanded from everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Nonie, I want to ask you about your own situation. In addition to speaking forcibly on these issues, in addition to starting an organization which seems to be radically courageous, you've also converted to Christianity. So under the law that makes you vulnerable, how do you proceed with your life? Do you have bodyguards? Are you subject to threats? How do you proceed?
I am relying on God. That's all. What can I say? It's hard. How am I going to live my life with bodyguards? I don't. I live in the safety and security in America. Let me tell you, there are very brave souls in the Middle East who are doing what I'm doing from the heart of the Muslim world, from the heart of the Arab world. And these are the real heroes. Some people call me a hero, but really the real heroes are some names in Cairo right now. There is a journalist in Egypt who has a death threat on him. He still lives in Cairo. And his name is Sayyid al-Qimani. There is, in one Friday, 50,000 mosques in Egypt issued a fatwa of death against him. He never left Islam. All he said, he was criticizing Sharia, some aspects of Sharia law. And this is what we're facing. There are many people who are doing much braver things. And you know, if everybody thinks about their safety and security, nothing will change. We really have to start in one voice speaking. And there are many people in America and in Canada who are so brave. And you guys inspire me. I wasn't a very brave person when I started. But when I saw the courage and the bravery of the American people, of the Canadian people who founded this great civilization of freedom, that's when I got my inspiration. So you guys inspired me.
Thank you very much.